What's going on, lifers? Welcome to another episode of Sick, Scared, and Stupid. I'm your host, Jake Thomas, and today's guest has been helping people improve their metabolic health and fitness as a personal trainer since 1998. So for me, I was like an eighth grader, so he's got some tenure
Rub
on
it
him.
in.
He is the host of the Healthy AF. You can assume what that stands for. And
After
Healthy
50.
After 50
That's right.
podcast, where he discusses practical strategies for unlocking optimal health and longevity. He also provides group coaching to the community in the Healthy AF Club. He's also the author of Kicking Ass After 50, and at present is in the production of a documentary I'll let him tell you more about. But without further ado, welcome to the show by way of Nashville, Tennessee, Mr. Zane Griggs.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. Great to connect with you here. This is fun. Yeah, we met in Wyoming, right? I mean, we were at Hack Your Health at the same time, but you were so busy doing push-ups that I don't think I had a chance to meet you. So we met in Wyoming. We were doing the doc, and you guys were up there eating great steak.
Yeah, what a beautiful place Wyoming was, and yeah, knocking out the push-ups at Hack Your Health. Freaking, Dr. Baker put up some big numbers on one of those Squatch fitness contests, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to see what I can do here and muscle up something, So had some fun there for sure. But yeah, Wyoming, we met up there obviously for the beef roundup, and you had something else going on up there. I didn't know was going to be in production as it was, but are you able to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's a documentary tentatively called Animal. We're hoping that sticks, which is really exploring the relationship between humans and animals for food, but in a we believe in a more holistic point of view, really contrasting the narrative, between, say, the industrial beef or industrial farming versus ranchers who are really taking care of their animals and so forth, and treating them humanely and raising food that they're going to feed to their own families. So they're thinking a lot more about the quality of that food, as well as the health aspect of animal products, meat, dairy, so forth in our diet. And we touch a little bit in some aspects on regenerative ag and the impact on the environment that true, really true ranching has, real ranching. But I mean, again, contrasting independent ranchers and how that kind of ranching and raising livestock affects the soil and the environment versus the industrial CAFO system that most people are familiar with, because it controls 85% of our meat production right now. So we're really trying to shine a holistic and more true, complete picture, light, I should say, on meat and our historic relationship with meat, but then how it can be done now to serve us completely, health, environment, and even economically. Really improve the way it's done. There's better ways to do it than what we've been seeing over the last, say, 30, 40, 50 years, really, since the Farm Bill was put into place. So, the one that serves the monocropping, which is destroying our soil and creating a lot of, it's in place to create more food, more cheap food. And we're seeing the risks play out in real time right now with the metabolic epidemic that we're all, you just can't go anywhere without seeing it. But I mean, it was just earlier this week, we had a lot of some of our favorite health experts at just testifying in front of the Senate, talking about the health epidemic and the government propping up through, again, the Farm Bill, through government subsidies, and through influence our food production, but also the influence of those large corporations on our nutrition recommendations, and how that has got us all turned around, and why we're seeing this food epidemics, or this metabolic disease epidemic. So it's all connected. It's all connected. You know this. And so we're trying to shine a more positive light again on what our original source of food was like when we had to raise food, or when we still have people who are raising food for us who would love to connect with us, or ranchers,
Yeah.
who would love to sell direct to us, and help people understand there's a huge difference between the meat they get in the grocery store and the meat that we get from ranchers. Because many times the meat you get in the grocery store is coming from another country. In most cases, it's
Yeah.
come from another country. It's been shipped here from somewhere in South America or maybe Australia, and it's not. It's even though it's marked U.S. beef or USDA beef, it was shipped here and then repackaged here. Maybe some U.S. Beef suet or fat was added to it, and then marked product of the USA, and that's just not the case. Even with your grass-fed options, you'll see grass-fed, grass-finished, and when it's labeled correctly, like even in Whole Foods, you'll have grass-finished beef, but it's from some of it's from Uruguay and Australia. So you've got meat from two different countries in one package of ground beef, but it's grass-fed. So you got two different countries represented in one package of ground beef. Think about how many cows are in that package of ground beef.
Yeah.
Could be 20, 40, 80.
Yeah.
And so whereas you buy it from a rancher, you've got a local rancher, you've got meat coming from one rancher, like one cow,
Yeah.
and from the U.S., and he can tell you exactly everything that happened to that cow. He can tell you whatever medications it needed, if it needed what it was fed, where it was fed,
Yeah.
what the soil was like.
Its name.
You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
vast difference between the industrial farming where you have they're automatically getting antibiotics because they're all shoved into the CAFO system. They're getting hormones. They're getting fed really poorly, right, for long periods of time, creating disease in their bodies. And so we wanted to tell a different story than what most people are hearing in the mainstream media, or where they think their meat's coming from, because most people just have no idea. And that's kind of the long-winded version. I didn't think I would take that long to explain.
No, it's really good. It's really good. And it sounds very personal to you.
It is. I've learned a lot in just doing the documentary, just speaking to ranchers. I knew a lot about the nutrition side and the health side already, just from years of this career, decades. But speaking to ranchers, I learned a lot about really the care they put into their animals, and about just the stark difference between, like I said, the industrial complex and the ranching system, and the fact that these ranchers are being driven out of business by it, because they can't they can't sustain them, so they can't compete, they can't sustain themselves, and they have a hard time connecting with enough people buying it, basically connect with consumers. Because it's just the convenience of the grocery store, and people then people don't really realize, where their meat's coming from when they buy it in the grocery store. And if they did, a lot of them would probably change the way they buy their meat.
Yeah. And, what Zane's talking about with the CAFO system, so concentrated animal feeding operation, basically any of your large scale industrialized food operations, whether it's slaughtering, butchering, processing, but just CAFO, CAFO. Typically the treatment of animals is not really foreseen in that regard. It's, just to produce product. But contrastingly, like what you're talking about is, much more intimate and artisanal. Not to say that it needs to be, slower or of less quality, but it's a much different sense of experience, apparently, between not just the animals, but with the producers themselves. Like when we were in Wyoming, I told Tyler McCann, who puts on the Beef Roundup, as much fun as it was to eat the steak and as enjoyable as that was for all of us, like those are delicious. It was hard not to enjoy that, but it was difficult emotionally for me to judge that, to think like this is someone's everything, right? The amount of care and work and time and investment that has gone into this, 1 ounce, very generous 1 ounce piece that we had to judge and taste, it was like, this is someone's everything. And like they were able to tell us about, this is the cow that it came from. and this is how it was raised, and this is where it was grown, and this is when it calved. And knowing those kind of life cycles really put a different um, opinion or perception, I should say, or appreciation, better than anything, from me
Mm-hmm.
as a consumer. And it really changed my experience with the whole thing. And like I said, it was much more difficult than I thought it would be based on that side, the emotional uh, toll that I kind of took to be like, wow, this is really somebody's everything. Is that something you kind of have seen, I guess, because of the people you've interviewed, putting this together, the conversations you've been having? Like, what is that context, or how does that context kind of play with you?
Yeah, it does. It does. You hear the care and the just the love for the lifestyle, really, but that is their focal point. They just want to be ranchers. They just want to take care of animals and feed people. They want to feed our country, and
Yeah.
we have a system currently in place that's being propped up by government subsidies through because of the feeding system, because of the monocrop system, that has given control of our 85% of our meat production to basically four multinational corporations that are owned by primarily by other countries, whether China. People don't realize that Smithfield, which owns Jimmy Dean, which owns Tyson, that's a Chinese company. We have others that are owned by, I think, Brazil. Um, and most of our meat comes through, is either shipped in, but it goes through, or if there are some local ranchers selling to them, they'll take a lot of the U.S. beef because it's higher quality, and they'll sell it on open auction, international auction. And so a lot of the U.S. beef is actually going to the Pacific Rim because it's better beef, and they'll pay more for it. And then the meat we see in the grocery store is, again, probably lower quality and coming from a country where there's lower standards, or
Mm.
where if someone's worried about the environmental aspect, I mean, there's like Brazil, they need more land for cattle. They'll just clear some rainforest, and then you're having it shipped, to another continent. So the most environmentally friendly thing you can do if you're worried about the environment is know your rancher, is to buy from a
Yeah.
regional or local rancher.
Yeah.
Um, but you're also getting better quality meat, and you're eating the meat that he's going to feed to his family. But yeah, it's their care they put into it, again, because they're feeding their family with it, want to feed others with it, and this is the life they've chosen. It's a hard life. You don't choose it because it's easy, right? These
Mm.
guys, they do this because they're living from the land, and they're trying to provide in this way, in a very traditional way, uh, and they're passionate about it, like you said, and they are going out of business by tens of thousands per year because of the current industrial system is kind of running them out of business, and they have enough power over the supply chain and the market that they can impact not just prices, but they can impact, if someone is selling to them, they can kind of shut them down, right? Well, we don't need more of your pork or your chicken or your beef.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then suddenly that guy's sitting on meat, he can't move. Oh no, he's been agreed, had the system set up, and it shuts a lot of them down. And so there's a move to empower these ranchers and to help them reach their consumers, right, in an economic way, but in a more convenient way, with apps. We met. What was that? I think something Harvest, Feed Harvest.
Friendly Harvest or
I'm messing.
Farm. I mean, Farm Share for sure was one, and
Yeah,
then Friendly Harvest or something
yeah. It was some
Harvest. I don't remember
Harvest
the
Fund,
other one.
and then the
Yeah.
Beef Initiative itself, which is they weren't in Wyoming, but they're out of Texas,
Yep. Yep.
based
Yep.
in Texas, but they're connecting ranchers all over the country, trying to help them connect with consumers through not just free education for the ranchers, but helping them if they want to set up a Shopify, or how do
Sure.
they set up their marketing and their brand and so forth. And so there is a move to help the ranchers with the business side of things, to help connect with people. But I think, again, there needs to be an education component for the consumers to realize the difference, in where their meat's coming from, and that so much of the meat that they're buying in the store, just, it isn't, even though it's marked that way, it isn't U.S. beef. You could have 50, 60, 80 different cows in that package of ground beef from different
Yeah.
countries. And the and it's hurting our local farmers economically. It's hurting our, and when we saw like through the shutdowns, there was a lot of supply chain issues. A lot of people noticed,
Yeah.
I'm sure, in the grocery stores with meat. Either,
Yep.
you were limited to how much you could buy. There would be shortages. That's because of this industrial system. Because all of the meat's got to go into these four corporations, which then have to ship it out. Well, if you're getting it directly, the people who were getting meat directly from the rancher, they didn't have an issue because the
Right.
rancher's still growing cows. He's just giving it to people locally or shipping it. He still has the same supply. But when our supply chain is primarily locked up by these four multinational corporations, and we have something happen like that incident of
2020.
with COVID lockdowns, then you have
Yeah.
you suddenly have a system that's being impacted on a large scale. All it takes is four corporations to be impacted by government shutdown, and there goes your food supply. And we all lived through that. We all saw that happen in the local grocery stores. And really, the people who are really hooked up with their rancher, they didn't have that issue.
Yeah.
So,
So how does a guy, like take us from, I guess, your own life cycle, right? Because you you're representing something in this documentary. You're embodying something, whether it's a lifestyle, uh, a resume, a testament. You're a symbol in this documentary, narrating and hosting and being kind of the face of this documentary. But take us back to, what preceded all that. The guy that started training clients 30 years ago and built up his rapport and was on the cover of Men's Fitness and then became an author and a father and all those things. Like, take us back to 1998. Where were you?
oh
And
my
the
gosh,
why that got you into all
whoo,
this thing.
think the Wayback Time Machine for that. That's a long time ago. I really, in my early mid 20s, I really got into, I started reading books about health because we didn't have the internet back then. Obviously, like we do
Yeah.
now, we can't just look anything up. So I had to really talk to people, trial and error, a lot of trial and error, reading books, and more trial and error. Had a lot of trial and error through the 90s, and found myself every time I met a trainer asking him 20 questions. It was just like asking, and so it kind of came through my own personal curiosity and thinking, okay, this is where I have all of my energy going in my personal time, like personal curiosity. With just fitness, with diet. I mean,
Yeah.
experimenting with vegetarian, experimenting with, and then going like low carb by 2002. It was like, okay, low carb for clients. And so who wanted to lose weight. And so it was very much it was driven by personal curiosity. And I decided this is what I want to do, and I'll figure it out, how I'll do it as I go. But it was an area that I kept wanting to dig into and kept experimenting with. So in '98, that's when I started, got certified and just started working in a couple different gyms and working with people. And I think that's where you really learn is working with people one on one.
Yep.
People, when you're coaching people, individuals, they will challenge all of your preconceived notions and beliefs and theories. Things that work for you don't work for somebody else, and things that work for the first five people that you worked with suddenly won't work with two or three more
Yeah.
of the next 10. So they challenge your theories, they challenge your experiences, and that's where you really you learn to and it makes you dig deeper. It's like, what am I missing here? What component of this am I missing? And so there's a lot. Again, trial and error, I don't think ever stops if you really want to keep learning. Because what I realized very quickly was that the mainstream uh, guidelines and all the instruction in my certification and study and so forth, that stuff didn't work. Or it worked for someone who was
Mm.
perfectly healthy. It might work well for someone who's perfectly metabolically healthy. We started coming up against people who have some level of metabolic disease and insulin resistance. A lot of that just won't. It's not effective. A lot of those recommendations aren't effective. So you have to go outside the box, right? You have to kind of go on the fringe and see what works and experiment. So back then, I got married that year. Had moved to Nashville that year, left California, moved to Nashville, and was just hustling through that same year I started. And so it was a stressful learning experience, but but I was motivated because this is what I love. This is where my biggest source of curiosity was. And so I really was motivated to figure out what worked for people. And that's why I came across low carb in 2002. Started working, playing with fasting in 2010. From reading something on a blog, and I was, let's play with that. Let's help
Yeah.
clients do this. And so through that course of trial and error, there was a lot of pushback from peers too. There's peers saying, "Oh, you have to have carbs in every diet, or it's dangerous, or you have to have, you can't go without eating, you can't, intermittent fasting." And so, while I think my ideas or my theories about some of those things has certainly changed over the years, these were tools that weren't taught, right? These were not mainstream tools. They weren't taught in textbooks. They weren't taught even in the conferences as being, hey, this is cutting edge. Let's try this. They were actually frowned upon. And so I just found that to be effective, I had to try things that were that were outside the box, that just were not mainstream, and just see how they worked. And that's really what got me to this point where I keep I try to stay intellectually curious and not get too romantic with my ideas, what I think has worked, and just keep trying to keep learning, keep learning nonstop, and understand that what I think I understand now, 5 years from now, there's probably going to be some nuance that comes into that challenges it. It makes me think, well, that works in this situation, but it doesn't work here. And I think a real coach, I think that's the benefit. If you're really coaching people, when you're really coaching individuals, it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you learning if you're really paying attention. And I think I like that challenge.
Oh yeah, you've got to have seen some things come and go, whether it's in pop culture, nutritional science, exercise, phys. I mean, any trend or fad that's come and gone rather than the last 30 years, right? To say like you talked about exploring vegetarianism and then going low carb and what it's like to want to be unconventional, but not out of like spite, but out of just curiosity,
Yeah.
and thinking like, what if there's more than one way to do this? Or like, hey, what if there's another side to that coin, as opposed to,
Mhm.
we're told like dogmatically, you need this in your diet, or you need to sleep exactly this many hours, or you need this many, liters of water a day. And I've always
Right.
said like, how can we need the same amount of sleep? How can we need the same amount of water? I mean, those
Right.
are reference points, sure. Like but 8 hours. What if it's 6? What if it's 9 for you? I don't
Mhm.
know. Like, what if the water intake? I don't know.
Mhm.
But I think I don't like saying question because people associate questioning with aggression or like
Right.
pointing a finger. But curiosity, curious is my favorite word. I love kind of impressing people to have the curiosity of a child forever, to never lose that, to always have the
Right.
curiosity of a child. Because childhood curiosity is what keeps you getting up when you're an infant and you don't know how to walk, but you continue to try regardless of how many times you scrape your knees, you fall and bust a tooth open. Like, there's never been in the history of humanity, aside from a physical inability to do so, a child or an infant who has quit and refused to
Right.
learn how to walk and say like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to crawl, or I'm going to slide, or I'm going to scooch. I am not going to walk. It's never happened, because the determination, you talked about being determined, motivated, it never leaves them. And I think it's driven by curiosity. Like, okay, what if I try it again? The internal dialogue of a child, I mean, it's more instinctual than meditative, but like,
Right.
what if I
Right.
try it again? Let me try that one more time. Okay, let's see what happens. Well, if I'm going to fall, I don't. Curiosity like keeps it going. And so, over all these years, do you have any like big points you can think of like, oh man, this was really going out on a limb as far as in changing methods, or ideas, or testing, experimenting, things like that, whether it was with yourself or with people that you were working with?
Oh wow. Yeah, I think I did. Recently, even just a few years ago, I was over for me at that point over leveraging. This may not be a real popular opinion. I usually get pushback on it,
Oh
but I was
boy, we
over
love that.
leveraging fasting and fasting workouts, and I'd done it for a good 8, 9, 10 years. Fasted workouts and a lot of intermittent fasting almost every day, 24-hour fast once a week, and I found myself getting run down. I was, again, at that point when I started feeling this, I was probably 49, 50 years old. I've been doing it for
Yep.
10 years. So a combination of age and time under that level of stress. But I realized I was over leveraging the stressors. My looking at blood work, there was a marker called sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, which was a little
Yep.
bit high, which
SHBA.
is a
Yep.
marker of stress and elevated cortisol levels. I was feeling run down. My sleep was disturbed and was just not good sleep. Just waking up a lot. Uh, and again, not making progress. I just felt overtrained and realized that with all these, I was pulling all these stressors. And you got family, career. I mean, we have to consider all stress in our lives. Whether it's including age, but what's going on in your career, what's going on with your family at the time. And I was over. I thought, okay, if a little is good, more is better. Well, and when you're younger, that can work for you. You can survive that. You can sustain that for a longer time. You can recover faster. But I found as I got in my late 40s, I wasn't recovering. And I realized, okay, so these are things that need to be managed. These are not things where I just hit the gas and go all out all the time. These are all stressors, and everything. Stress creates adaptation. But like with working out, with overtraining, you can overtrain. If water's good, right? But too much water and
Yep.
you have natremia, right? You water down
Yeah. Yeah.
your minerals. Cold plunge. You could probably overdo cold plunge and stress the body out, right? So there's
Yep.
a being mindful of how much of these good things, or good habits that can create a positive stress. How many of those things am I leveraging? And is this the appropriate time to leverage them? And they need to be managed. And so it was a little bit of a ego check on my own humanity and age and what I could withstand. And then this mantra, I mean, almost like these ideas that I'd been, just talking about and promoting to everyone, like this, all a little good, more's better, keep doing, and realizing there was a time and place for that. There's a place in someone's metabolic, health journey that maybe more of that is good. And as you get leaner, you have to be careful. You have to, what are your goals? Are you trying to build? You trying to lose, or with age, maybe you can withstand less stress. And I had to allow more nuance to come in and realize there needs to be more thought around what is the impact on the individual for a particular tool,
Yep.
and start treating these approaches, whether it's low carb or carnivore or fasting workouts, like tools, right? That need to be applied appropriately with the right amount, not just throw it all in and see what happens,
Right. Right. Right.
And that was humbling at first, but then it was a true learning experience where I realized, okay, this is I can sit here and look wounded, or I can like step into it and realize I can take this experience and help people even more so. Be a better coach from it, especially people who are closer to my age or older, and
Yep.
understand why maybe when they're over these, if they don't work, their body starts to shut down, or their stress hormones start to go too high, or they not getting enough sleep and they feel run down. And it's like, how do we gauge these things to make their body respond and not uh, react in the opposite direction with elevated cortisol, and maybe holding on to fat, holding on uh, because it thinks it's starving, like
Yep.
trying to preserve energy
Right.
and lower their thyroid levels, to preserve energy and keep them from starving to death, because you're creating too much stress, right?
Yep.
So it was a learning experience, humbling one, and but I at the end of it, I was thankful for it, because Again, I learned how to help people better. But that was a big wake up call for me. Um, and it was just a few years ago. But I hope, I hope I can teach me to pay better attention to what my body's telling me
Yep.
sooner. But at the same time, it taught me that, it impressed me more. Like nuance with each individual really is, it's crucial to not go in with too many preconceived ideas. We understand foundational things, and we understand general tools work in this way. But
Right.
understand each person's an individual, and we may not be able to see or account for um, their differences between the last person you worked with and most people you work with until you get in there, until you get under the hood and really start making some changes and seeing how their body responds. You know, so I would say that was the biggest one in the last few years.
It's a hot topic too, in modern times. Zane is talking about hormesis or hormetic
Mm-hmm.
stress, pretty much like by definition. Hormetic stress, basically any type of induced stress on the body that can be beneficial, done in the proper dosages to build kind of strength and resilience, but overdone can be detrimental or even deadly. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of made a good point with whether it's fasting or with cold plunge. Contrast therapy, I think, is probably the simplest one to understand, meaning like, yeah, too much heat, death. Too much cold, death. The right amounts of each of those can induce this wonderful hormonal cocktail of benefit to the body and aid in recovery and give tons of oxytocin, serotonin, epinephrine, norepinephrine, like all these wonderful
Right.
hormonal cocktails, and you know help us be able to better endure stressful situations because it's opened us up to this kind of newer understanding of stress range and tolerance. If we live in a world of very little tolerance of stress, whenever anything hits those parameters or those barriers, it's going to be like a live wire to us of like, oh, that's uncomfortable, it's unfamiliar, we're not good here. But if we can work and kind of establish, whether it's through prolonged fasting, right, like, hey, I can go 24 hours without food, I'm good here. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
it might have taken you time to kind of get into that and get comfortable and familiar and be confident, as opposed to if you have that forced on you and you've never done it before, like you're like, oh my god, I'm 10 hours into it, I'm starving, my mind is going crazy because it's unfamiliar. But yes, done too much and done too many, maybe concurrently, oh yeah, hard
Yeah.
trouble real
Right.
fast. Like I've been fasting every day. I get up every morning, I'm in the cold plunge, then I stand on my needle, my Shakti mat, and then I'm in the sauna, and then I do red light therapy, and then I do brain tapping or mind tapping, and then it's like, dude, like that's a lot of variables. It's a lot of inputs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're all good for me. Okay, well, just because they're good for me, it's still a lot of processing that the body has to go through in order to interpret, receive, and then figure out how to deal with that. And then, not to mention, if we are talking about a roller coaster of stress, like, okay,
Right.
hormone, receptors turned on, activation, upregulation, distribution, and then we got to have a come down. And then if we do it all over again, whether it's through fasting or through the cold plunge or through sauna, each one of those is another, ascension, crescendo, climax, and then we got to come back down to earth. And it's like that's a lot on the body, even though they're all good for us. I,
Right.
I say a very similar thing to people with food, and then I'm going to throw the question back at you about how you made changes regarding fasting. But I say this a lot about food, where people are saying, yeah, I take this supplement because it's blah, 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 blah for this reason, and it's good for me. Or I eat these foods, da, 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 da. Or no, you know what you need to drink because you're having a cold, or you know what you need right now because of this or that. Like, same kind of concept of, did you ever think like maybe too many of those things is not always the answer? And
Right.
possibly there is an addition through subtraction. But yeah, but it's good for me. Okay, but like you don't need five different greens powders and six different multivitamins and four different types of protein shakes on top
Right.
of the tinctures and the droppers and these essential oils. Like it's so much. It's such an overwhelming amount of information for the body to have to process. Each one of those things has to be identified, like, hey, nice to meet you, how's it going? Okay, over there. Hey, nice to meet you, how's it going? It's like you talked about getting married. It's like being at your wedding. Hey, thanks for coming. Hey, thanks for coming. Hey, did you even have a good time? Did you remember everything greatly? Or was it more of like a lot of handshakes and cheek kisses? Thank you for coming. But I don't really remember much of it. A lot of that is like our body
Yeah.
with processing, whether it's hormetic stress or ingestion of variables. We still got to go through this process to break everybody down and you know, delegate where people go and how to use them. So I throw it back at you. What did you do, Zane? You saw this, like, or had this aha moment about fasting was actually hindering,
Mm.
sounds like, performance, and you were experiencing muscle fatigue, just overall sense of restlessness, or maybe not getting enough sleep. But like, all right, cool. Problem. What was the solution?
Well, it was that I took it slow because I didn't know how much, I didn't want to swing completely the other direction. I started adjusting and really asking other people. I started asking other people who I know, who had I trusted, their opinion, if they'd experienced this before. I talked to a sleep coach actually about her opinion of it, and she had been a faster, and so.
Sick, Scared, and Stupid is brought to you by Life Like Us, a brand dedicated to empowering individuals to reclaim their health, strength, and clarity in a world that often profits from confusion and compromise. Life Like Us believes in the power of self-determination and the pursuit of personal excellence. Their mission is to inspire a return to natural, unaltered lifestyles that support health the way nature intended. Each product is designed and produced proudly in the USA, using only the highest quality materials to share a meaningful message. By choosing Life Like Us, you're not just purchasing apparel. You're joining a movement that values discipline, self-actualization, and the courage to take control of your health. Visit thelifelikeus.com to explore the full collection and become part of a community dedicated to clarity, strength, and truth.
I started adjusting, started doing more fed workouts rather than fasted workouts for starters.
Yep.
So fed and then eat instead of going 16 or 18 hours. And then I said, well, that's double stress right there because you got workout and fast. So it's like, well, there's a easy place to adjust some stress, but still get the workout in without taking something away. I got rid of the 24-hour. I stopped working on the 24-hour fast and then got rid of the 24-hour fast and just managing maybe a few intermittent fasting days in the week that weren't on workout days, or maybe doing a little fasted cardio. So it was an adjustment of playing with the variables. And I noticed I started feeling a little better. Like, even though I wasn't as lean as I had been before, but I was like, I felt better. I slept better. Realizing that if I was going to fast or adjust my eating window, maybe I want to do that by shortening how late I ate in the evening and adjust my eating window to earlier in the day when I'm, when we're more insulin sensitive, when I'm more active, when I'm going to put that to use instead of having one big meal at night or having two meals at the end of the day. And so making those kind of adjustments and playing with to see what really helped me sleep better, recover better, allowed me to make progress with my workouts. And I really recently, to really make that correction with sleep, I really made how well I sleep one of the main barometers, along with how well I recover from my workouts, or if their strength is improving, depending on how I'm training. And judging by how my sleep, I was basically monitoring with an Oura ring and looking at deep sleep, REM sleep, and trying to get getting a little more granular with that, and seeing how my body responded on fasting days versus unfasted days. And so recent, as of the last many months now, I'm trying to correct that with bringing cortisol levels down, stress hormones down by not fasting right now. And then I think at some point, it's something I will probably toggle back in and out of, or I kind of am leaning towards 3 to 5 day water fasts at certain periods of the year, like once, twice, 3 times a year, to really get the autophagy, to really get the benefit from the fasting without creating a chronic stress from fasting.
Got it.
And then not, and doing fed workouts, like, okay, that's a stressor, and doing high intensity interval stuff, and that's a stressor, and realizing that, you know, when I was 40, I may not have had to do it this way, but now I'm going to be 54 in November,
Yeah.
and
Still
I have to make
looking 40
adjustments.
though.
So I'm not trying to
Still looking
lay
40 if you.
this adjustment on everybody. I'm not going to go tell a 35-year-old, oh, you got to do it this way, or you're going to, I would, because that's going back to what I was doing before, where it's like a one size fits all, and realizing,
Yep.
understanding that every tool or every strategy, whether it's dietary, a workout, the fasting, the sun, all those things have risks. They have benefits and they have risks. And if we don't respect the risks and acknowledge the risks, or now acknowledge potential downside, then we aren't responsibly using that tool.
Yep.
And we may be blind when it starts to have a negative impact. If it has a negative impact because we're overusing it, we'll be blind to it. We'll start to, we want to, the saying of diet harder. We want to diet hard. Oh, we're not getting the results we want, so we're going to diet harder.
Yeah.
I'm not making progress in my workout, so I'm going to add more volume.
Yep.
And it's like, wait a minute.
Yep.
What if you're already over leveraging that tool and you need to rein it in a little bit?
Yep.
What if you would benefit from a little more rest and recovery and sleep, and you need some downtime, and you need to do the things that are conducive to better sleep? And that means doing less to let your body recover, so that when you do this particular, whatever you use this particular tool, it has actually more of an impact, because it isn't something you're doing chronically.
Totally. And
you have time to recover from the stress it creates. And as we get older, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. Guess what? You need a little more time for recovery. and I will have to put myself in that. I just say I have to put myself in that place now. It's it was humbling, but I'm like, well, this is where I am. But if I can help people who are also there not be so frustrated, and like you and I probably have similar clients, where they're very high charging, very alpha type, like their lives are full.
Sure.
And if they are trying to run a business, or have a position, a corporate position, they have a family, and they don't account for those things being stressors, and they realize, okay, your tools, your strategy has to work with those things, has to acknowledge the stress that comes from your career, your family, your age, and what if you have travel that week, whatever else is in your life.
Yep.
Those things matter. You don't just blow through them like a bull. You have to respect them, and respect your body's ability to recover. And so and realize it's not about doing everything more at the 10th level, right? Yep. It's just, there's an ebb and flow that our bodies go through. And we may not know exactly what that is, but we have to look at the signs that our bodies are telling us and saying, hey, this isn't working, you need to rest. Or maybe just use one of these tools now and use the other tool in 2 days. And it could be, it's not something you can write up in a blog post. It's not something that you can just put in a tweet.
Right.
It's not one size fits all. Here, you can start with a framework, but then you're always going to have to adjust, because our bodies are constantly adjusting to create homeostasis.
Yeah, improving.
Yeah, we don't freeze dry at homeostasis.
Right.
We are constantly shaking up. We're doing, our things are moving us away from homeostasis, and then it's the move back that creates the adaptation. Yeah. And so if we move ourselves too far away from homeostasis, then it takes a lot more to come back, and it can be very disruptive, as you mentioned before. It can be very disruptive to your body's overall system and its ability to just function.
Yeah.
So that's long-winded again, but it's just not a simple answer. It's not a simple, like, here, just do it this way. Yeah. It's pay attention and understand that what gets you from A to B. Let's say you start off and you've got some weight to lose, you're metabolically challenged, you're in some resistance. What gets you from A to B may not be what gets you from B to C.
Yep. Or back from B to A. Like, it might not be the same path back, Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so your strategy may have to change as you move along based on where it is where you are now, you know?
Yep.
And that's where, there's complexity to that. And it doesn't sell well. It's not a great
No,
marketing
no,
message at
it's not a
all.
magic bullet or
No,
magic
but there
pill. It's
is,
not a
there's
silver
no magic
bullet.
bullet.
Yeah, and
It's like
it's
your
not a
body's
silver bullet.
constantly changing. And so we have to respect that.
Man, turning 54, looking 34, number one. This guy.
Well, thank you, but that's,
Yeah.
you might be a
Jeez.
little
I
over.
mean, I think Brad Pitt just turned 60 or like 60-ish or close to it, but like putting him to shame, Zane, I gotta say, man. Uh
Hmm.
what was I gonna say? Something else you had in there that was really good. Oh, groundbreaking statement of as we get older, we need more recovery. Everybody remember that one. All right.
I
That's
mean,
that's
it's
that's
really
big.
not,
Right.
it's like,
Like, hey, in
duh.
case you didn't know,
Yeah.
you're gonna age and age will come to you in one form or another. And it doesn't have to be bad, but like Zane kind of touched on, just respect aspects of life.
Hmm.
Respect aspects of your life. Understand that things come with risk. Understand pulling those levers and utilizing those, leveraging those levers. Like we've all got this kind of toolbox,
Hmm.
and these tools can be assets or liabilities. And if we try to throw every tool in the box at something,
Hmm.
that can very quickly become a liability, even though
Oh,
they're
yeah.
all assets. But just like you said, trying to do all of these things, like, dude, okay, you don't need to be, example, client A shows up and is very experienced, per their telling us so, very familiar with exercise. I've dieted a long time. I know my macros. I can eat intuitively. I got a lot of experience with fasting, and I train a lot. Da, da, da. Okay, okay. And I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I'm an ultra marathon. Like, all right, okay.
Hmm.
And you are qualified, ma'am. I want you to put me in a 2 pound per week calorie deficit, and I want to be training every single day, and I'm going to be two a day workouts. Da, 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 da. I'm like, okay, all right. I'll be the one standing there at the end when you burn out and saying, I told you so. I'm not going to say that, but like in my mind,
Hmm.
that's what's going on. As opposed to person B looks phenomenal, looks like a bionic human being. What does he do? What does she do? I don't know, but she doesn't do a lot to her own language. She walks a little bit. She gets some mobility work in here and there, but she just eats and lives a very regimented lifestyle. Not strict, but just regimented.
Consistent. Yeah.
Consistent. She does not take 10 spin classes a week. She does not do 2 a days with Metcons and a WOD at the CrossFit gym. Why is it that friends of ours, people we know, clients, acquaintances, they work out 10 times a week, but they don't look like it? Everybody watching, anybody listening, you have these friends. They work out religiously, but
Yeah.
they don't look like they do. They don't necessarily act like someone you would think would act who does so much of this. They're always kind of wired in not a seemingly calm way, but in kind of an erratic way. Like, what's going on there? They're groggy, but they most of all don't look the part. Why? Whereas B, C, or D, Joe or Jane, again, they look like bionic human beings, and all they do is walk, and they eat this very simple kind of diet and keep these little bit of principles and habits about getting up at this time, going to sleep at this time,
Hmm.
staying away from certain types of lights, and prioritizing these few things, yet they look to be this certain way. And I just bring it right back to, like, yeah, all those levers, they're great, but if you throw all of them
Hmm.
at once and try to maintain that, like, what's your longevity like as an athlete? What's your career span like as an athlete? You've been doing this coaching wise for 30 years, but you've got longer than that of practice,
Yeah.
of yourself, of experience. Like, that speaks to your method, so to speak. That speaks to your method. That's a career worth of testament, as opposed to someone that comes in. It's like, how long they've been working out? A few months, a few years. It's like, man, I'm in the interest or in the business of like showing people how to do this forever, because it's not about getting into the gym and turning it on. It's like, this is an always on kind of mindset,
Right.
meaning like life is exercise. The
Yeah.
experience of life requires mechanical movement. It requires the gait to have to operate. It requires different postures and overhead movements and lunges and body mechanics that you need to know and understand and be able to implement without having to think, I'm not in the gym, so I don't have to do that. Or only when I'm in the gym is when I turn them all on and I'm going to throw every bit of this arsenal at that. And it's like, kind of back to what you're saying, like sometimes it is about taking ego out of it and having to say, all right, as much as I want to go to CrossFit 10 times a week, twice a day for 5 days, it's like, maybe we don't need to do the Metcon and then the WOD. Like maybe we can do the WOD today, the Metcon tomorrow. Or tell us more about how you've managed to do it for this long and how you continue to seem to be reverse aging. And what's the key to that? Is it a mental thing to you? Is it a physical thing to you? Is it a dietary thing to you? Is it a combination of all these things to you? Like what,
Wow.
if you got to put it in a pill, which doesn't exist,
No, it doesn't exist.
how would you best encapsulate that?
Wow. Well, I mean, it was definitely, again, a lot of trial and error. That last thing I mentioned being one of the bigger errors that I learned a lot from, um, and monitoring everything, sleep and um, and workout performance as good indicators of where I am in my recovery. And because if you're overdoing it, overtraining, that's going to negatively impact sleep, and it's going to negatively impact how you feel after workout, days after workout, or how you perform at the next workout. And so those are big indicators for me. And then with diet, I've learned, I put animal protein at the center of my diet, but I've gone from super low carb. I've experimented with more of a balanced diet, and I've kind of come back to somewhere in the middle, which can vary a bit depending on activity. But I know one thing's for sure, depending on where you are, because I think that can vary depending on where someone is in their journey and what their goals are.
Sure.
Avoiding processed food is probably the single greatest thing you can do, ultra processed food, for your diet, right? Yeah. Avoiding that, sticking to primarily single ingredient food, basically avoiding toxins. Now you can vary your macros and play with that and without a whole lot of damage, right? Generally speaking, if you're metabolically healthy, if you're sticking to whole food with an animal-based approach, in my opinion, you're going to be, you go play with some variables, but you're not going to be way outside the box. You're not going to go too far wrong.
Yeah.
When we start introducing the ultra processed food with the seed oils, so highly processed grains and the added sugars, and that becomes a large part of our diet, then we're adding in substances that our body really wouldn't recognize as food. And it has to work really hard to counter the oxidation created by those foods. And oxidation is basically what will probably, if you're lucky, kill us all. So if you don't die from a disease, that's what creates inflammation and metabolic disease, and really makes us feel run down and tired and ages us. And so these processed foods create a high level of oxidation in our bodies that much higher than what a whole food would. And they many times, whole foods will come with some level of endogenous or built-in antioxidants. We have our own endogenous antioxidants, but when we start eating these ultra-processed foods in large amounts, we over-leverage our body's ability to counter this oxidation in our body. And I think understanding that early on, that whole food should be the center, the primary kind of rule for diet, and then playing within that, I think has really helped me age slowly over the years. And when limiting alcohol, to be honest, is another big one. So as far as aging goes, I mean, alcohol and processed food are probably two of the biggest, I think, inputs that we can consciously avoid that would slow the aging process. We all want to die of old age, right? Yeah. And so age it's inevitable, but how you get there has a lot to do with those kind of choices. Smoking, drinking, and processed food are going to over leverage your body's ability to to reduce oxidation, and that it impacts recovery once again. But it's not some, those are not things you can out exercise
Yeah.
or out sleep,
Yeah.
right? Those toxins you're putting in your body your body's trying to figure out what to do with, that are creating a sense of a free radical, like basically flames,
Yeah.
right, in your body, that your body's trying to put out the fire. There's no amount of exercise or sleep that's going to counter those stressors. It's very different from just overdoing it, from overtraining, or from over leveraging fasting, or from being in a state where you've pulled these too many levers. Those are foreign entities that are attacking your body,
Unforced
and
errors.
they are the only way to counter them is to not put them in,
Yep.
is to remove them. You cannot take enough antioxidants
Yep.
to counter the oxidation that you're putting in your body. If 30% of your diet is coming from ultra processed food, and you're drinking 3 or 4 nights a week,
Right.
or you're vaping and smoking and taking, it's there. I think of understanding that and monitoring those things early on has been um, a big part of it. So not so much what I did, but what I didn't do, what
Yeah.
I didn't partake of.
Yeah.
And we got to understand, we're always looking for that thing that help us, like the hack, right? Yeah. We want the hack. We want the thing that allows us to embellish or engage in something we know we really shouldn't. And then we want the antidote.
Yeah.
And the real antidote is, don't put the poison in your body. And I think when it comes to what you just mentioned, we're aging slowly. That's probably one of the most crucial components of it. Was come to that understanding early on. And it doesn't sound very sexy, but it's like
it's not the one people want to hear. That's for sure.
It's not what people want to hear.
Like,
it's not. There's no way to
Zane, just tell me to lift harder. Tell me to run further.
Yeah.
Tell me I need to work out 10 times a week instead of 9.
Mm-hmm.
We are an actionable society, an actionable culture. We are hyper consumers. That's what we do. Everywhere we go and look, we're being pitched to buy this, go there, do this, read this, listen here. We want to do it. We want to do something to solve. We like to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. Fire, put it out.
Yeah.
But as opposed to omit or don't or disclude, like, oh, these words don't bode well with me and my family, my peer group, my social group, my upbringing, my religion. Ooh, like we're hitting hot points now, Zane, about like, don't tell me that it's about what I'm putting in my mouth and surrounding myself with that I need to change or do less of in order to get more out of. Like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, food used to be scarce.
Yeah.
And there weren't that many sources of it. We basically, we had to grow it or raise it, hunt it, gather it, right? And whatever that was, it came in its original form, and we could do stuff to it once we got it home. I mean, people made bread for thousands of years without it causing metabolic disease, because they had a process to take the wheat they grew that was good wheat, and they made bread, and it didn't cause diabetes or obesity or heart disease. Right. They ate corn in such a way, and they're like the Aztecs and the Mayans and so forth. They had a process for corn that allowed them to digest it better, and it didn't have the negative impact. And so there was these traditional processes, traditional foods, and now food has become abundant, convenient. It's for comfort.
Oh yeah.
It is not scarce. It is not out of, like, I know this food is going to bring this into my body to heal this part or to satisfy this thing, or to, it doesn't take work to achieve. It doesn't take, it's abundant and convenient and easily accessible and created to hit all of our, receptors in our brain, or pleasure receptors in our brain, and some of it to be addictive. And if we don't recognize that and respect that as something that we have to limit in our lives and go back to thinking about how would I have eaten 150 years ago, and try to mold our diet around that.
which is
As
not
much,
which is not a long time ago.
it's not a long time ago.
Very, very near past.
Yeah, we don't have to go back 2,000 years. We don't have to go back
Yeah.
10,000 years. We have to go back a million years.
Yeah.
150 years ago, we didn't have metabolic disease.
Yeah.
So we were doing something right. We had infectious disease. We had wars. We had famine. We had drought. We didn't have metabolic disease like we see now. It was like single digit percentage of, it was like 1% obesity in 1900. It was like type 2 diabetes was almost unheard of, and maybe associated with alcoholism.
Yeah.
Heart disease was very rare.
Yeah, tuberculosis was the major killer.
Yeah.
It was the major
TB.
disease.
Yeah. But it wasn't because we were eating ourselves to death.
Right.
Or drink, it's just, and so we don't have to go back that far to see when we were doing things correctly in that particular area where we weren't creating metabolic disease. And now we're seeing it with kids, with 40 or 50% of kids being metabolically unhealthy, pre-diabetic, and fatty liver coming out with teenagers, which is unheard of, And so we're obviously doing something wrong. And the first place you look for metabolic disease is your diet. And so it's not when you look at the evidence, it's not that hard to see. It's not that hard to figure out. What we're putting in, a lot of what we're putting, when you look at the disease state, the metabolic disease, most of what's going in doesn't belong.
Yeah.
It's not the food that we ate 150 years ago. So it's not a popular message.
So then your mission with the documentary is personal, to bring it full circle.
I think it is. I think it is. And it resonated with me, not just from a health perspective, but because it does go for full circle with the economics of our country, right? Keeping these original, this is the original small business, is ranching and farming and growing food. It's the original small business where we all 80% of us used to live that way. And now it's like 3% of us. Yeah. So this is the original small business. The economy works. It keeps the meat. They want to feed the U.S. population, not the Pacific Rim. And we can keep that part of our economy alive and healthy, and not having to go towards multinational, send their meat to multinational corporations because they don't have any other choice. And we can impact the environment positively, because we're overcropping our soils in the Midwest, and it's turning soil into dirt and desertification. Just like you could see, like the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, Iraq used to be a farming area. Now it's a desert. The parts of Africa have been over-farmed, and now they're high desert. And so when you treat the soil right with livestock, when you do that properly, you can see grass and birds and bees and animals and rain come back to that area. And you can actually attract the rain, and then the carbon everyone's so worried about that's in the air gets soaked into the healthy soil. So we have a circle of life, and we have a circle of death, and we have two choices. And the ranching system with regenerative ag built in, and we're buying our food directly from them, that creates health, environment, and economics. That's the circle of life. Yeah. And we have the industrial meat complex and CAFO system, which is damaging the environment. It's bad for our health, and it's negatively impacting our economics from the rancher to our supply chain, and sending our one of our most precious resources, which is the beef that's raised here, outside of our country, right? And the money for processing that outside of our country, because those companies are owned by other countries.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's real clear. But I didn't see that until I started working on the documentary. Two systems, two flywheels. And one is all good, and the other isn't.
That's a pretty clear way to put it. It's a pretty clear way to put it. And it sounds like you're in a good place, though, doing what you're doing with that. Like, clearly it's, like you said, it connected emotionally with it, and like got a little bit of a personal
Yeah. No.
vindictiveness attached to it in a good way. Like hey, it's a battleground,
Yeah.
right? It's not a battleground per se with guns and explosives, but it's like, hey, it's a place to be able to lobby
Yeah.
or speak or be heard or just to raise awareness and educate, hopefully
Yeah.
enlighten or expand some minds and knowledge, and just have people say like, whoa, like just like you said, just from the fact of having started this, how much more it's opened your own eyes up to it. I mean, mine too. Just listening to this, I'm like, damn, like that shit's deep, you know.
Mm.
But having gone up to Wyoming and done all that, I mean, the last year, a couple of years, it's hard to avoid now, especially what took place in the house just the other day, yesterday or 2 days ago with the roundtable, like you kind of talked about earlier, is big, man. Like, the last few months, I've heard politicians and even former presidential candidates saying words and talking about things regarding health and nutrition and diet and lifestyle that I've never heard in my
Mm.
life. Never
Right.
heard a politician,
Right.
certainly not a presidential candidate, use some of these buzzwords. Never. I've heard
Right.
people talk about education, fiscal spending, foreign policy, gun legislation, abortion rights, um, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But never have I heard what I've heard the last few months and especially the last few weeks on
Mm.
mainstream television, on
Mainstream people
network
using the
television.
term seed oil.
Yeah, yeah. Not just in a Reddit backroom or in our little YouTube
Right.
channel, where
Right.
we're like, hey, check out this, like on major
Mainstream
network
news.
television. Yeah,
Yeah.
mainstream news. That's big, man. That's whether our little resistance is grassroots still and it's underground and it's swelling, hopefully, fine. But like what you're doing, man, with the documentary and like the people that you have involved with that, it's real and like it's gonna hit a nerve, like no doubt about it. So the more I guess they try to like silence you guys, the more you're doing the right thing.
I think that's it. I'm as excited as anybody to see that in the mainstream conversation, even if it's people are, as we saw, like the Atlantic came out with an article which kind of made fun of it all, called it woo woo, and okay, criticize it. I expect criticism, but at least it's a conversation that's being heard because it's gone from grassroots to mainstream, a conversation where something government needs to, like, we can make this better
Yeah,
with our government. We can help move this along and address the issue. Yeah, I didn't think we'd hear it in the mainstream for another decade.
yeah,
I'm shocked.
yeah,
So it's rewarding. It's kind of, and I do hope the documentary, helps people see more of that as well and validates, all of those conversations. Uh, and it's just, but a personal. I mean, as you said, it's personal to me. So it's just doing the project, being a part of it, is rewarding enough. And I know
that's
the people
awesome.
that will make the effort to see it, um, will are people who support it. Great. I think though that it will, through the initial support through the community, the alternative health community, um, that see it will share it, and there will be people who maybe have a change of perspective after they've seen it. It will at least get them to ask questions.
Yeah,
If you get people who are unsure or who are just looking for answers, to ask questions or to say, okay, well, okay, that makes sense, or you know, uh, and try something new, then it's a success. You know,
yeah,
but yeah, it's called Animal right now on Instagram. We have one social media because it's just early in the. We're still producing it. We're still making it, but it's Animal Film Doc, I believe, on Instagram. But that's the only one we got, so you can look for that. I post about it. I share some stuff from it, but it's Animal Film Doc, on Instagram. So it's just it's hard. A lot of animal movies out there. So we had to come up with
yeah,
something that
yeah.
wasn't used yet. But it will get more out there, and you'll start seeing it being kind of promoted and clips from it. And I think it's had a lot of support already just from the community,
Yep.
that you and I are a part of. Uh, but I'm looking for it to be with the current conversations like we were talking about there in the mainstream. I hope that awareness brought by those conversations will help this documentary, which we're trying to tell like a story,
Yep.
um, have more eyes on it as well. And we're going to submit it to some film festivals, submit it to like Cannes and Sundance, and
Nice.
maybe
Nice.
the one in Palm Springs. We'll
Nice.
see, but it's just, we're trying to get it seen. We're trying to get it out there, knowing there's going to be criticism, knowing there's going to be pushback. But again, if it helps people ask questions and brings a new light to an area where someone was unclear, then it's done its job.
That's awesome. Well, man, we know you're busy.
Okay.
Been going back and forth between Nashville and the West Coast, shooting and interviewing, and quick turnarounds for fly there, do your 12 hours on set, fly right back, and got kids on both coasts and a home there
Mm-hmm.
in Nashville, and work and clients there in Nashville. What's going on in the life of Zane Griggs now and upcoming, and where do we find you? Where do we connect with you? All the good
Oh
stuff.
wow. Well, I'm doing some, speaking some conferences. Got Biohackers World coming up in Miami in October 26th, 27th on a panel there, and doing some interviews. And there's one in Boulder called Dragonfly Wellness coming up. Maybe not before this is out, but October 16th through 18th is I'm going to be there on a couple panels. One's working with a regen panel, animal or men's health and hormones, one on oils, healthy oils. And so just kind of going out there. And I love those because you get to connect with people, get to see
Yeah.
people in person, connect with not just the speakers, but with the people who are coming looking for questions. I always end up in great conversations with people who have either tried something and here's their success story, or they're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And so those are fun ways to connect with people and kind of help people that I normally wouldn't get to meet. But you can find that out. ZaneGriggs.com is my website. It's got all my socials on there. I'm most active on Instagram, which is at Zane Griggs Fitness. That's the best place probably to find what I'm doing now or what I have coming up with conferences and so forth. But, it's been a big year for me as far as ramping up those kind of places, conferences, and be able to go and especially with the documentary. And I'm expecting that to continue just because I enjoy it. And
Yeah.
it's fun, and it's again a great way to connect. So those are really, I think with the documentary coming out, I think more of those they're gonna snowball. So I look forward to obviously seeing you again one of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
as stuff comes up with Hack Your Health and things
For
like
sure.
that. But
For sure.
I think that's I would love to continue getting this message out, in a big way like that. It's I love working one on one with people because they challenge my theories, they challenge um, my thesis. Many times they keep me learning, but then to find a way to kind of a bigger platform to kind of whether it's on panels at conferences where you get to everybody sharing ideas and
Yeah.
sharing experiences with people, um, or creating my own platform at some point where I can really uh, share what I have learned over the last, I mean, really since I was 17,
Yeah.
you know, and that's a lot of years. But to help people not, avoid the mistakes that I made, and to give them a shortcut, whether they're starting at 20 or they're starting at 50, it's like learn from my mistakes. And here's what I've learned. It may not work exactly it is for how, for me as it did for you, but be aware of some of the twists and turns and the things to watch out for. And so that's really my motivation is to share share that journey and to help people, have a shorter path to success with their
Yeah.
health than I had.
Well, freaking A, man. We really appreciate you being here today, and thank you for taking the time.
Happy, Jay. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, everybody else, we'll have all of Zane's information in the show notes where you can follow along with him online, sign up with Zane, how to connect with him in his coaching program as well in his community, where to buy his book, where to find out and learn more about the documentary Animal up and coming. So stay tuned for all that. It will be available for you guys in the notes. But For everything else, again, thanks so much to Zane for joining us for another episode of Sick, Scared, and Stupid. I'm your host, Jake Thomas. We'll see you next time.